Hello everybody, Maven here, and I'm sure you already know about the gimmick you can do with Prismatic Hunter and Radiant Dance Machines. You can become a helicopter and spam infinite ascension. I get it, it's old news, I'm late to the party. But instead of showcasing off that gimmick for a quick little shorts video, I decided to take that and create a fully fledged build with it. And let me tell you, it is by far my favorite Radiant Dance Machines build I ever made. And don't get me wrong, I've done several Radiant Dance Machine builds on this channel. The last one I did was actually just a couple weeks ago, when I did a Void build with the Ergo Sum with the Radiant Dance Machines. And it was a very interesting gimmick. If you want to check it out, I'll link it in the card in the top right corner. And outside of some niche gimmick, I feel that this is the closest that Radiant Dance Machines has ever been to being an actual legit build. So let's break it down. Hope you enjoy. So if you're new to Destiny, here's what the Radiant Dance Machines do. When you dodge near an enemy, you get the multi-dodge buff for 5 seconds. During that time, you have infinite dodge charges, and final blows will refresh and extend that timer up to 10 seconds. So you can basically dodge forever, so long as you keep getting final blows to refresh that timer to 10 seconds. After the buff it received a few seasons ago, the uptime of this exotic is very generous, and it's pretty easy to keep it going. Now, if you pay attention to the background gameplay, you may have noticed me using Ascension an infinite amount of times, which jolts enemies, and the Ascension ability just so happens to consume your dodge energy when you use it. And since the Radiant Dance Machines give us infinite dodge energy, that also means we can spam Ascension and become a sentient helicopter. Another thing you might have noticed from the background gameplay is that we also have infinite threaded needle melee abilities. That's somewhat like a hidden perk of the Radiant Dance Machines if you think about it. The exotic tells you have infinite dodge energy, but if you run Gambler's Dodge, then you also have infinite melee energy as well. And Threaded Needle just so happens to be a very good ad-clear melee ability, so we can just dodge needle, dodge needle, dodge needle forever, and if we get surrounded, we can just spam Ascension. Meanwhile, all these kills are making us invis constantly with Stylish Executioner, since Ascension jolts and Threaded Needle severs, making this build very solid for survivability. And I'll probably time it so you're seeing my run through of a solo expert Lost Sector in the background gameplay. Now, it wasn't the smoothest gameplay in the world, but it'll have to do. It's just there to show you how good the build is at surviving. And in this solo expert Lost Sector, I didn't get into the red health a single time. As a matter of fact, I had full health plus an overshield for a vast majority of the time. And there's not many builds in the game that are doing that in this kind of content. So aside from Stylish Executioner, our other tools of survivability include Devour from the Buried Bloodlines exotic perk. We just gotta get 4 kills with it and we get Devour. Then we got the Recuperation mod on our boots to heal us whenever we get orbs. Then there's Facet of Protection. When we're surrounded, we get a 15% damage resist. Then we got Facet of Purpose, which is giving us Woven Mail every time we pick up orbs, which is a 45% damage resist. And then there's the Galvanic Armor Artifact mod, giving us a 30% damage resist when we're amplified, which is literally infinite because you get 15 seconds of amplified just for using Ascension. Then there's the Void Hegemony Artifact mod, which is giving us overshields whenever we defeat a weakened target, which is synergizing with our Buried Bloodlines Catalyst, which weakens on hit while we have Devour. Then we got Facet of Blessing, giving us health regen on Threaded Spike final blows. And finally, every enemy in our path is getting severed by our Threaded Spike spam, reducing their damage output by 30%. So with all these things combined, it's very easy to survive with this build, and it's super potent with its consistency, damage output, ad clear, and ability spam. During the entire solo expert Lost Sector run, we didn't drop multi-dodge, Devour, or Radiant a single time. We kept it up the whole way through. Now let's talk about our weapons with this build. Obviously using the Envious Bait Edge Transit because it's the best legendary heavy in the game right now, but what about our other 2 weapons? Well, I'm not going to say these other 2 weapons are absolutely required. I mean, it is nice to have the Buried Bloodline for Devour and the Overshield synergies we talked about earlier, and on top of that there's the Expanding Abyss Artifact mod, improving its damage output even further, so this thing hits like an absolute truck. But all I'm going to say is that you for sure want to be running a Strand weapon and a Void weapon. The reason for this is because we are using Facet of Bravery, which says defeating a target with a powered melee final blow grants us Unraveling rounds, and defeating a target with a grenade final blow grants us volatile rounds. And the grapple ability has always had this strange interaction where it's the only grenade ability in the game that also counts as a powered melee, meaning that it will proc melee-based mods such as heavy-handed and impact induction. But at the same time, it will also proc grenade-based stuff, meaning that with Facet of Bravery, we will get unraveling rounds and volatile rounds for grapple final blows. That's why we want a Strand and Void weapon. And in the background gameplay, you can see what I mean. Get a grapple punch kill, and suddenly we got volatile rounds for some more juicy ad clear. Meanwhile, we are working on proccing that Devour, in addition to all the other benefits the Buried Bloodline provides. It's just a no-brainer. If you got the Buried Bloodline, use it. But I often get YouTube comments from people complaining that they don't have the Buried Bloodline yet. And if you're one of those people, don't worry, you don't absolutely need it for this build. Just run your favorite Void weapon to take advantage of volatile rounds, and that should be fine enough. Now moving on, as you can see, my Strand weapon of choice is the Breach Light because it has the best possible synergy with this build out of all Strand primaries. Personally, I don't enjoy it too much and I would rather run Rufus's Fury, but I can't deny the synergy. It synergizes in 5 different ways. So the god roll we're using is Demolitionist for more grapple spam, and then Desperate Measures, which gives us a 30% damage buff for 8 seconds if we enhance it, and it's refreshable on final blows, so it's amazing. And I'll show another orrery clip in the background gameplay with the Breach Light, so watch our weapon buffs. You get stacks of Desperate Measures for getting grenade or melee final blows, and remember, since this build spams all the threaded spikes in the world, it's literally free to get 3 stacks of Desperate Measures and achieve that 30% damage buff. And now I want to turn your attention to our magazine size. Do you see something wacky going on here? Well, the Breach Light happens to have an origin trait called Cast No Shadows. This says dealing melee damage reloads 20% of your magazine. But then there's an artifact mod this season called Saint's Inspiration that says that the Cast No Shadows origin trait will now cause your magazine to overflow when it procs up to double its magazine size. So as you saw in the background gameplay, we got up to 61 bullets in our magazine, and it happened so quickly after just a couple threaded spikes. And the mag can be even bigger if you got something like appended or extended mag. And then there's another artifact mod called Threaded Blast, which basically makes your Tangle detonations into OG Warmind Cell detonations when you break them with a Strand weapon. So between that, the Cast No Shadows combo, the Desperate Measures combo, and Demolitionist for grapple spam, that makes the Breach Light insanely good for this build. Although, like I said, personally I'm not the biggest fan of the feel of it, and I'll probably swap off. And another recommendation would be either the Aisha's Embrace or any other Strand Pulse Rifle, and the reason for this is because the Buried Bloodline deals with unstops and Ascension deals with overloads. So all you need is something for barriers. And that about does it for our weapons. Now, the last fragment I didn't mention is Facet of Balance, just for a little bit of ability spam, and now finally onto the mod setup. And I'm just gonna say, with weird builds and playstyles comes weird mod setups. This is probably the weirdest mod setup ever seen on my channel. So let me just start by addressing the 2 different elephants in the room, and that is 2 copies of Heavy-Handed on our gloves and 2 copies of Powerful Attraction on our class item. So one would actually argue that you should run 3 copies of Heavy-Handed with this build because it makes total sense. And for those who don't know, Heavy-Handed makes an Orb of Power on power melee final blows. And with this build, you're dodging, spiking, just throwing a ton of threaded spikes, and they're making orbs. But when you have 1 copy of Heavy-Handed, it has a 10-second cooldown before you can make another Orb of Power. When you have 2 copies of Heavy-Handed, it's a 5-second cooldown, and when you got 3 copies, it's a 1-second cooldown. So every time you dodge, throw a spike, dodge, throw a spike, you're making an orb every single time. And since you're dodging constantly with the Radiant Dance Machines, you're picking up those Orbs of Power with Powerful Attraction on your class item. But when you run more copies of Powerful Attraction, it increases the radius. It goes from 12 meters up to 18 meters, making the radius a lot more generous. And trust me, this is very, very necessary and makes the build a lot more consistent. But the reason I'm running Impact Induction on my gloves instead of a 3rd copy of Heavy-Handed is because this mod is very good for grapple spam, which I enjoy. But optimally, you should run 3 copies of Heavy-Handed. Now moving on, since we're meleeing so much, we got 2 copies of Hands-On on our helmet, and then we got a Strand Siphon. You can run Void Siphon if you want though, and then we have 3 different resists on the chest you can swap out according to whatever you're doing. And then on the boost, we got Absolution, Innervation, and Recuperation to give us a bunch of ability energy and health back whenever we pick up orbs, which obviously with this combo that we just talked about is happening constantly. And then just for the heck of it, we got a copy of Reaper on the class item. And for our stat distribution, I'd recommend tier 9 mobility, tier 10 resilience and discipline, while maintaining a minimum of tier 3 intellect, and the rest doesn't matter. And I guess the last thing to mention is there are 2 more artifact mods to point out. There's Radiant Orbs, which makes us radiant on orb pickup, and then there's Shield Crush, which increases our ability cooldown and damage if we have a certain ability active. And since we will always have Woven Mail, Radiant, and Amplified, we will always be getting increased grenade and melee damage. So the artifact is really juicing up this build this season. I think we talked about 7 different artifact mods in this video, which is by far a record on this channel. I don't think I've ever made a build that abused that many artifact mods before. And that about does it for the build breakdown. It's a very unconventional and unique way to play Destiny 2, but it absolutely slaps and add clear based activities. Is it the strongest Radiant Dance Machines build there is? I don't know, honestly, you be the judge, but the last Radiant Dance Machines build we did with Ergo Sum was probably stronger in concept, but this one's numbers don't lie. We're stacking just an ungodly amount of things for survivability that it just does not die. So long as there are ads around, yeah, you're not dying. I don't think I died a single time with this build so far. So as always, I'll leave the dim loadout link to this build down below in the description, and also the pinned comment if you'd like to give it a try. And if you got any buddies who are Hunter mains, I'd appreciate if you share the video with them. I'm sure they'd find it enjoyable. And if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate if you drop a like and a comment, because doing those things really helps out the algorithm and goes a long way. And if you are new here, please consider subscribing. Would love to have you here on this journey to 100K. And with that, I will catch you in the next video. See you later.